Hi, this is Marlene with Miami Ghost Chronicles, and I want to welcome you to another episode of Stories of the Supernatural. Whether you're watching a video or listening to a podcast, please like and subscribe to us so that you can get notification of when a new show is released. Links to videos or MP3 files can be found on MiamiGhostChronicles.com. Go to MarlenePardo.com for information on new book releases. I narrate several podcast series that can be found on major podcast platforms and can also be listened to via Alexa, Sonos, and other home systems. Look for Supernatural Storytime for scary storytelling, Nightshade Diary for classic horror and adventure stories, Stories of the Supernatural for interviews with different guests on the show. If you want to get noteworthy news about the paranormal world, true crime, conspiracy stories, and anything that is just plain weird, just visit Stranger Than Fiction Stories tab at MiamiGhostChronicles.com or find us on Blogspot. I want to thank you for being part of my audience, and I think you are all wonderful. Hi, everybody. This is Marlene with Stories of the Supernatural. How's everybody doing? Good, I hope. I am doing good. All is, well, I take that back because I know everybody wants an update on Chicken World. I don't know. In the previous shows, I had said something that I had gotten some blue Andalusian chicks. Okay. I lost a couple. They just died. That happens a lot with chicks, even though I had grown them pretty much. I had moved them into an old dog crate, not the plastic ones, the caged ones, because these types of this species of chickens, they're foragers. And if you keep them, even as they're growing up, if you keep them like in an enclosed, too close spot, which is what I was doing to keep them safe as chicks, they kind of like can pick on each other. So I moved them to this big, bottom line, to make a long story short, this morning I went out something, and I don't know yet, which has got me totally wigged out, dug under the crate, which had metal, and pulled out two of my chicks, killed them. I don't know. Well, they're gone. Ate them. I take it. And injured a third one. I've got three left. And one is injured on the wing. So I promptly removed them all. And I'm still perplexed because whatever it did, dug, it had to be some people say it could be a raccoon, it could be a possum. So I've got, in other words, I had to go through two fences. I've got an outer fence around my whole property. And then I've got a fence around this area, of a large area where I keep all the chickens. But bottom line, this thing went under the crate, the iron, and it just, pulled them out. So yeah, things are not good in Marlene's chicken kingdom. Not at all. But it is what it is when you live out in the middle of the sticks like I do. But again, now I've got a predator out there, which usually they stayed away because I have my dogs go out at night. I don't leave them out, but I think between the smell of the dogs and everything, I hadn't had a problem, but I think I'm going to have to start doing that pretty soon. And what can I say? It's one of those things. Anyway, let me get on and talk about one of my sponsors. This is Plan to Stay Safe. They have a bunch of great little what I call spy gear, but really it's not spy gear, it's more like safety stuff. This is inexpensive stuff, like not like a big security system, but let's say if you need a travel alarm, something that you want to hang on the doorknob. Let's say you're in a hotel room, you want to hang like an alarm on the doorknob, make sure if it ever goes off, somebody comes into your hotel room. It also has a bunch of things like that that are great safety features. They have a large array of women's self-defense products. Also, things like those smaller cameras and like diversion safes. Like, hey, I'm not going to buy this huge big safe, but I want a place that I could stash some money, maybe some of my valuables that I want to keep. They've got a bunch of really well-priced products of that type where you could just like hide some of your stuff in case anybody does ever break into your place. Chances are, they're not going to know what to look for. They've got a lot of stuff like that. So check them out. PlanToStaySafe.com. PlanToStaySafe.com. Say that 3 times really quick. They, believe me, they've got a bunch of stuff there. Well-priced and practical. That's what I call it. It's practical stuff for everyday living. All right. Especially if you want to stay safe, and this is how you plan to stay safe. Now let's go on to the good part. The good part has to do, of course, with who we have as a guest today. And this is a first-time guest here at Stories of the Supernatural. Her name is Pamela K. Kinney, and Pamela is an award-winning published author of horror, science fiction, fantasy poetry, and a ghost wrangler of nonfiction ghost books published by Schiffer Publishing. Her horror short story Bottled Spirits, published by Buzzy Mag, was runner-up for the 2013 Small Press Award. All right. Two of her nonfiction ghost books were nominated for Library of Virginia Awards. I know that I think she's published another book. We'll ask her about this. Her latest nonfiction book to be published, Paranormal Petersburg, Virginia, and the Tri-City areas, was released in 2015. She's also done acting on stage and in films and is a master costumer, costuming since 1972. And she even does paranormal investigating, including for DVDs for Paranormal World Seekers, filmed by Ava Productions. She was casting director for High Mountain Films movie, The 19th. She was an extra in the film too, and she wrote a horror screenplay, Crawl Space Creep, now with an indie production company. She's a member of Horror Writers Association, the local Virginia chapter. She admits she can always be found at her desk and on her computer writing, and yes, the house husband and even the cat sometimes suffer for it. I get that. Guilty as charged myself. And she's also written under the pseudonym Sapphire Phelan, which she published erotic and sweet paranormal fantasy science fiction romance, along with a couple of erotic horror stories. Her erotic urban fantasy by the pseudonym Sapphire Phelan, being familiar with a witch, is a Prism 2010 Awards winner and an Epic Awards 2010 finalist. The sequel to Being Familiar with a Witch, A Familiar Tangle with Hell, was released in June of 2011 from Phase Books. Both ebooks were combined into one print, and The Witch and the Familiar released in April 24th of 2012. And help me welcome her, and we can talk also about her latest book. How are you doing today, Pamela?
I'm doing fine. And I can tell you the Sapphire stuff right now, I got all the rights back because the publisher of that, I don't know what happened, but they gave us our rights back. It's
Really?
Mundania, the main ones, and Phase is their part of them. So and
Mm-hmm.
someday I'll probably put them up just to self-publish it. I'm at that point with them. And yes, there is another ghost book, Haunted Surrey of Suffolk. I got my rights back. Me and the publisher did not have an eye to eye thing, but it was 2 years on the contract, and he gave it to me. Now he's
Mm-hmm.
trying to Amazon because that's how I used it to take down the button that's showing it for sale for free, brand new. And I
Okay.
know they say that have to leave the cover up because of used books, which is fine. There was a used thrift store or something selling one. But the new thing is what my issue is because I have the rights back, and my publisher for the Werewolf, Dogmen, and other Shapeshifter Stalking North America said she would take the ghost book. So I'm
Right, because the Dogman, this is the latest one that you just released. That's
yeah,
the werewolf book that you just put out right now, recently, right?
right. Just recently,
Okay.
it came out April 26th.
Okay, here we are, right in the heels of it. Okay. So, boy, you've been doing costuming, you've been doing everything. And but how let me ask you, obviously, how did you get involved in all of this as far as, well, I understand as far as the fiction, but the nonfiction books, how did you ever have your own personal experience, or what happened?
Well, yeah, I grew up with the ghost stuff, so that to me is pretty well
Okay.
given. And then my mother was inherited from my mother. I'm probably my father too, but definitely my mother because she used to have actually have dreams that came true, and she'd tell me a couple of them, so they did come true. It's not like anything else, but um,
Okay.
the whole thing with the ghost books is the one for Schiffer, the main one I had one other, but Dinah Roseberry had went to work for them, and they didn't know what to do with the ghost book division. All they do is nonfiction. Schiffer does, so they gave it to her, and she asked any of us that we were all members of the Mid Atlantic Horror Professionals at that time, a forum, if anybody wanted to
Mhm.
write about real ghost stories. And I remember growing because I read that stuff. I mean, Hans Holzer and that, and I remember some stuff about Richmond, even though I lived in California. So I kind of looked up how to do a book proposal because it's totally different than writing fiction, and wrote
Mhm.
one up and stuff, and they accepted it, and that was Haunted Richmond, Virginia at first, and but since then I've been published and one of them actually went to second printing, second edition as of 2019. That's Virginia's Haunted Historic Triangle, Waynesburg, Yorktown, Jamestown, and other haunted locations. It sold out for the first big run.
I'm gonna stop you right there. What is Virginia's triangle? What is that? Is that like
It's it's Williamsburg, Jamestown, and Yorktown. That's like the main three. I added
mhm,
other stuff around it because it's a whole big area, and it's considered by a lot of people, and they have enough go at least in Williamsburg. They have enough
mhm,
going into Colonial Williamsburg, ghost tours, not just by Colonial Williamsburg itself, but by all other sorts of groups. So it's considered a very haunted spot, and I'm pretty sure that has helped the book too.
true.
And but yeah, it's a pretty haunted spot. Though Paranormal Petersburg, that book in that area, Petersburg, I live not far from there. That one
Mhm.
could actually give them a run toe to toe if they ever could do that. I mean, it has the same issues of a lot of me getting a lot of images. But yeah, Triangle is a whole interesting place. So
Okay. So, because I had never heard of it, that's why I'm asking. I was like, I mean, I know that that area, like you said, those towns, they have like a lot of historical significance, and usually with that you get ghost activity, whether historical or urban myths. But I had never heard of the triangle thing, and I was like,
yeah,
that's
it's considered the three main ones: Yorktown, Jamestown, and Williamsburg, because they were like the big main colonial
yeah,
area.
because these, right? I was gonna say these areas are pre-revolutionary colonial type
Yeah,
settlements were in that area.
oh,
Because
believe me.
yeah, the history is, we're talking at least maybe 400 years, 300 something years as far as settlements, in other words.
Right.
So
Well, I
I
live in
bet.
an area. I mean, Petersburg is the same thing. That's why I think it goes back to the 1600s. So yeah,
Hmm.
both of 'em, the area just yeah has a lot.
Right. There's a lot of layers there as far as, well, like everything else. But yeah, because, sometimes, a lot of times people think that, especially in southern states, that everything as far as ghost stories is always like Civil War era things. And in some of these cities, it's the settlements and the cities and everything predate the Civil War by a couple of hundred years in some cases.
Well, especially Jamestown. That's the first, I mean, civilization settlement settled by
Hmm.
the English, so it's literally there. I live not far here in Chesterfield, which it's in my not in my Petersburg book. I should have done it, but it's in my Haunted Richmond too. Is
Hmm.
Henricus, city of Henricus, which was actually this. I could say second, though technically I could be the third because there was supposed to be one in the middle that didn't make it. But they Saint Sir Thomas came up the river and they settled there with a fort and all that. So that is also has a lot of hauntings. Believe me,
Right.
they're used to that there.
I bet. I bet. Imagine that there's a lot of stuff in the unexpected places, because a lot of human history, wherever you have human history, you're going to get some, whether it's an intelligent or residual haunting, you're bound to run into something when you least expect it. So let me ask you, this last book that you did about werewolves and dogmen, how did that come up? How did you decide to do that book?
Pandemic came, I always wanted to do if I did another one last nonfiction, I'd want to do on werewolves and of course dogmen. Now you have to add it because they sure hell look like werewolves in all the
Hmm.
stories. And then you got other shapeshifters I knew. So I thought in the United
Okay.
States of America, I'm home doing it. And I had actually written two novels during that time too. But I also
Okay.
went ahead and wrote this and got so many books of all kinds. So I could look through even the ones that had all sorts of things to find anything that would be remotely what I'm looking for in the areas. And there was a lot. I mean, a lot of it's Native American to start with, so that some of those are in there. And then,
Hmm.
so there's mythology and all that stuff. But there's also some people that have experiences, if they have witnesses, and those stories are in there too. So, and then of course, the first chapter of the history of shapeshifters and werewolves and stuff like that, actually worldwide. I mean, it goes back thousands of years. I mean, literally. So,
Right. Right. Even though you hear a lot of people, because we hear like in even in Europe, like in France, the Gevaudan, that they had that the wolves, that supposedly everybody was paying attention to this. I believe they killed over 200 people, but like you said, it's all over whether they're humans that supposedly, like you said, shapeshift into,
right.
let's say in this case, wolves. And then you get the other stories about dogmen. Let's go with that. that supposedly they're not. There's nothing human. They're not transforming. That's what they are all the time.
At least that's
Something
what
that's
they say. They haven't caught,
right,
nobody's ever caught one to see
right,
it do
exactly,
anything.
right, exactly. But a lot of people, they describe these encounters that it'd be like, I'll take a Bigfoot anytime over something like that. It'd be like, oh my
Actually,
god.
I wouldn't
Yeah,
mind seeing one of those over Bigfoot. I used to have nightmares about Bigfoot. Believe it or not, I was coming home from a ghost thing, and it was in Charles City, which is a part of Virginia. It's actually in the historic triangle when I got, because they're all plantations. And it was, of
right.
course, all country. Literally, this place is still country. It's not far from
Hmm.
here. And I'm driving along at night, and I kept thinking, what if Bigfoot was to come step out from those trees? And I thought, oh, I hope to God, I would be freaked out as can be. But yeah, I'd rather see a, I have to admit, I wouldn't mind seeing a dog man or a wolf man or whatever it is.
I guess, it's like everything that we're subject to all these ideas, but to me, it's like, I guess since I don't know, you always think if something's going to eat me, it's going to be the dog man versus a Bigfoot. Either I'd probably, but either one though. Let's face it, I'd have a moment of like, oh, you know. But the shape shifting thing, yeah, that's almost like because some people think that it's only like a Native American, as in the U.S. Native Americans who have that shape shifting legend, but that's found all over the world, right?
Yeah, it's all over the world. It's gone back with, well, heck, to Greece, Rome with the twins, and Greece
Hmm.
with Lycos. I mean, that was supposedly Zeus turned him into a werewolf because he made Zeus eat human flesh and didn't tell him, and so
Right.
there's stories. And it's not just werewolves. I mean, it depends on what part of the world you live in. I mean, there's only, I think, 5 species of wolves worldwide. I found that somewhere. But if someone lives somewhere, there's werefoxes, the Cassoni, there's
Hmm.
were-tigers, lions, hippopotamus, that sort of stuff. So
Right. I know in India they have that weird tiger thing um that like you said, like they shapeshift, in other words, they were men. And I believe that one of the things they would say is that because you know how they have those that once a tiger becomes the one of the signs is that that was a man-eating tiger. In other words, that once one of these animals tasted human flesh, that's what they would go after. And I believe they would say that when you saw the tiger stalking its prey, that you know how they come, like they put their belly on the ground
yeah,
and they would keep their head low to the ground, that was the souls of all the humans it had killed. In other words, not only did it kill you physically, basically it would keep your soul. And that's why it would come down with its head low. And I was reading that one time. I was like, whoa, okay. So yeah, there's, absolutely there's that supernatural aspect, not only that it's going to eat you or kill you and or eat you, but also trap your soul,
oh, I
which
like
is
that. I
is
really
like,
like that. I really like that. That's cool.
yes, in
I'm a
India, that's
picture
one of the
hungry. You just
things.
gave me some ideas for future stories. So
Well, the thing is, like everything else, especially when you look at these animals, once it attacks a human, it's like, okay, there's something wrong with this animal. In other
right.
words, it's acting out of its norm, I guess. Whether
Well,
it is or it was just hungry, I mean, who knows? But that was like the forbidden thing. Once that animal is capable of attacking and killing a human, that's it.
Well, a lot of them
But
get older and their teeth have problems, and
hmm,
it's a
yeah,
lot easier to catch a human over a bunch of monkeys and stuff like that.
oh
So
sure, sure. But you know what all animals, including predators, they're opportunistic, especially if they're hurt, sick. Um, they'll just eat whatever they can catch because that's better than starving, like all things. I think the fox is the one that's out of Japan. I'm not sure. I think
yeah,
there's a
Kinney,
version of like a were fox kind of
yeah,
thing, uh,
Kasuni.
right, in Japan. So there's always some version, but I think it's seen more of also like that, like the fox thing, that it's a trickster, that kind of thing
Yeah,
where
it's coyote, and then the coyote
coyote.
here. There's always
And
a trickster somewhere in the world too. So
let me ask you, Pamela, do you think, because again, like you said, dogmen, we really ever haven't captured one to say this is an animal. In other words, not your typical werewolf idea where it's a human that transforms into
Well,
a
I
wolf.
gather people have seen them close enough to say they had hands. So
Right.
that would say opposable thumb. That's what makes us different from the animal kingdom. Our dogs don't have opposable thumbs. Even my cats, you may have like 5 toes, but you can't make that one at the end. Any of them do like humans can. And
Exactly.
she can catch, she's done it, but still, it's like, it's not the same as us. So
Exactly. Exactly. And
that
that's what you hear about the dogmen, that they have hands, even though they're claw tipped and they're animal like, but they're still hands.
just like werewolves, if you watch some of the good
Right.
movies.
Right. And well, I've heard that in some cases people compare when they've seen them, they compare them to the Hollywood version, like it looked like this, muscular, like
Like a
uh
human body.
right, like like let's say the Van Helsing movie where they had
Yeah,
of
that
course
was a
there's
good one. That
CGI,
definitely would look like a dog man.
like a
That's
dog man, um, you know, very tall, muscular, uh in other words, the proportions is not like how when the Lon Chaney thing where it was a man that turned into a wolf, but his physically he was still a man, and also something like the Acadians in Louisiana had that thing about the loup garou that
yeah,
basically you were the same thing. It was like a curse kind of deal, but it was almost always like a human that was cursed, but physically the wolf still I don't know, it's weird because sometimes you hear that they turn into a wolf, literally into a wolf, not like a human wolf thing.
right,
And then others are it's that mixture of the human with the wolfish things going on.
right.
Um, what did you come across when you were did you ever get to interview or speak to anybody who'd had an actual sighting
Not
of
really. I found a lot of them online. I know some
right?
people that do and that not only do ghosts, but they investigate. They got a group of dogmen one, but they haven't
Mhm.
gotten anything on their websites other than what people said the witnesses.
Right.
And I don't know if they really go out and do the actual hunting thing. I mean, you probably would need someone who's a good tracker to begin with, could tell you what's a real print
Right.
you're seeing and stuff too.
Right.
Uh, I just wouldn't mind seeing one.
Well, the thing is, you always hear mostly the people that I've heard of have sightings have been hunters or, people that weren't really looking to have the encounter. They were out there either camping, hunting. Then you hear the same, some experiences of people seeing them in unexpected places closer to urban areas.
Right, like the
That,
piece of Bray Road, they're driving along and here it comes right in front of their or racing
right,
along in the wood, like, what the heck, and
right. And what's really, you know, in some cases, how can I say it? The reports on this predate, how can I say it, modern interest in it. You understand?
yeah.
Where people were saying, "Hey, I've had this experience. I've seen this, I've seen that," and somebody took a report on it and put it away. And it wasn't like they were trying to gain any type of notoriety. They were just, "I've never seen this before, and I got to tell you about it because either A, I think it's a strange animal, or something along those lines." And then it's only when somebody goes back and looks at all this documentation or these archives that they realize, wait a minute, all during this time, there's people that have basically describing the same thing.
And it's been there. With Dogmen has Michigan dog has gone back farther than the 30s where it started a lot of stuff. This goes all the way back. So there's
Right.
stories. People seen it. Even the stories of werewolves, someone just called one Dismal Swamp here. I found that before I wrote the ghost book. I found it with this book. So when I get my
Mhm.
right book, I'm gonna put it in there to put it so it'll match with the rest of the stuff. They called it a werewolf, but it had some of the actions that almost like a dogman. So is it what they call a dogman or is it a werewolf? Of course, nobody sees anything shift and change, but still that it's stunning and it looks like a wolf. Yeah, it's been going, a lot of things have been happening. So who knows what werewolves, maybe people had real sightings, especially primitive people. If you think about the sighting of shape shifting and they see something like that in medieval Europe, for example, in the Dark Ages, they see a wolf walking, gets up, it's no longer, they're frightened because they're thinking it's one of the wolves they used to have to attack. and suddenly, but instead it gets up on its hind legs and starts walking.
Exactly.
I can imagine they're thinking, did somebody I know turn into a wolf or something? That's probably how all that started. I mean,
Right. I mean, it could be, um, uh, because see, back then, wolves were a menace. Real wolves were a menace. So that they were already seen as predators that you got to be careful with. But mostly unless you were caught out unawares, by a pack of wolves, you would be okay. And it's when, but normally they wouldn't go on a rampage and be start killing people. And I think a lot of times, I guess when you read these accounts, part of you is like, how much is real eyewitness, or is this how much is it it's superstition? Where does one begin and the other one end?
oh yeah,
Or are we just being like, oh, we're so modern, and those poor superstitious people from the 16th century just, mistakenly identified a werewolf for, whatever, anything else,
well,
Um,
they have, years ago when I was younger, I wish I could have found that book. I had a book, it was a bunch of different stuff. This was about the 70s. And
mhm,
one of them was actually a actual, no, 60s it was. It was an actual thing from a medieval manuscript they found, how someone can become a werewolf, taking a fur of a wolf made into a belt and using
mhm,
the full moon, not to chant, because the full moons, we think that came out all that later, but using it to chant something to help them get the power to shift. But they needed that belt on in order to do it, which was interesting. So that was an actual medieval manuscript that they found. So that was in that
right,
book. So that was kind of interesting, that. So they, like I said, a lot of people had that stuff. And going back, I mean, there's a lot of things. There's that one you talked about in France.
mhm,
Actually, on someplace I saw a show saying that they think it could have been that one could have been a hyena. So I don't know if that's true. A trained hyena, who would train a hyena and have it in that era of France? I don't know, but who knows? I mean,
well, from what I
unfortunately,
understand, if I remember, I mean, it killed, like, according to this, the numbers, I think it was like 200 people that even the king
yeah,
got involved. It wasn't like, oh, off in the countryside, if some peasants got killed by wolves, oh, those stupid peasants. No, it actually caught the attention because there were so many people
yeah.
being killed that I don't know how a hyena is gonna do that, you
I don't know.
know?
That's what someone's explained. So they did do a logic behind it, but that's just one thing. I mean, and
Right.
actually, let's talk about hyenas. In Africa, people can become were hyenas. They believe that.
Eh,
So
yeah,
there's
that's
another
right.
talking about shapeshifters, but we want to go into the story about it.
Yes, yes, because it's like, are we talking something distinctly different, or are we in reality just seeing the result of shape shifting?
So
Um,
yeah, so that's hard to say. Like I said, it's all in the history and stuff. And actually, a lot of people, like the Native Americans and stuff, a lot of them actually, shamans have spirit animals, so they like the thought of having the power of an animal. And
mhm,
the skinwalkers in Navajo, of course, they turn it to a bad thing, though. What they do, they're witches trying to make enough evil so they can shift, and not just coyotes or wolves, but hawks, owls, all sorts different whatever is in their area. So
right,
that's right there proving, it's not just people that cursed or just want to become a werewolf. They're witches, and witches were connected to werewolves in medieval Europe. They were burning people accused of being a werewolf too,
sure,
and they accused
sure.
some witches of being werewolves because they could turn into wolves too. So
Oh, because absolutely, if you were a human being and you were able to shapeshift, let's say, into a wolf, you had to have made a pact with the devil. There's no other way of getting out of that. Because otherwise, in other words, it wasn't like, and of course, alchemy or anything of that nature, like you said, a manuscript, that would have been considered heresy, and that's it. You're burning. And by the way, from what I understand, yeah, any of these people that were supposedly thought to be shapeshifters or werewolves or whatever, not only did they kill you, they killed them in horrible ways. They executed them horribly.
they burned
Um,
them. That's enough to be a horrible way of
they
dying. I
know,
mean,
but they there was one, was it Peter Stube? I think it was in Germany. They sawed him in half, like down the middle. I mean, it was like, they, in other words, it wasn't just an execution.
Yeah,
It was the most horrible way that you can execute, the most agonizing or way or torturous way that you could execute a human being. And to me, when I read these things, to me, it's like, besides, all these executions would, draw in the public, from the surrounding area. And I'm thinking to myself, this is called this is a psyop. This is like them telling them, don't ever dabble with the supernatural, because look what's going to happen to you. You know,
yeah.
um, so it wasn't just getting rid of, and you know what? And sometimes I think, m- mayhaps what they were looking at was maybe somebody that's got a mental illness, because
Yeah.
it could have been that simple. Especially if this person went ahead and committed murder. Who knows?
One of
Uh,
them did that. I was it Peter. I had to almost look through my book, but one of them did say he was a werewolf. He was changing, but he
right,
was, like you said, mental, and that's called lycanthropy anyway.
right.
And let's talk about other people. And I talked to other friends about this. There are people
Mhm,
that are actually born with a problem that they are have hair on them. And they
mhm,
have to shave it off and it grows back. What about
mhm,
those people that can't help that?
right.
Makes you wonder what people thought about them. That when they look like when I seen a baby one time in a paper from Mexico, and it was all the
Mhm,
hair, and almost remind you closer to the 1940s Lon Chaney Jr. werewolf, literally, because that's what they look like. It's all that hair, and you don't get a snout. But think about primitive
right.
people. Oh my gosh, this baby has hair. He's a werewolf or
Yes,
something.
exactly. What was it? And the reason why I know that is because you know that a lot of these circuses and shows would winter here in Florida.
Yeah,
And there was one lady, I can't remember her real name, but I think you know how they would tour with what they call freak shows. I think she was called Monkey Girl or Monkey Lady or Monkey Woman, something like that. And she had exactly what you were describing,
yeah,
that she had like hair everywhere. And her husband was a guy that called Lizard Man, because he had some type of like growth that you looked at his skin and it
yeah.
looked like really scaly. And exactly what you're describing, if you take these people and you go back a couple of 100 years and this child is born like that, you know, if it wasn't killed outright, um, yeah, of course it's they're going to look at it like from the devil.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, that's the way they would look at it. They would not understand that this is just I guess what, a genetic mutation or something like that.
Just things happen.
Uh,
I think for the hair, it's some kind of disease, or I'm trying to remember what it was called, but it's something
like,
that some
or
people
like,
get.
yeah, too much hair. Like you don't, yeah, you have hair all over the place. But yeah, for those years, they didn't see the science wasn't there. How's that to
To back them up. Yeah,
back them up? Exactly. And I know that even and I'm sure you've heard of that the place in Utah, the Skinwalker Ranch out there, that's like real, that's gotten a lot of attention.
right.
From what I understand, the origins before, way, way, way many, was from the Navajos. I believe that
I think
they
also
they kind of gave it a wide berth because of a bad skinwalker reputation, supposedly.
I think there's also another Indian tribe that was there that got killed. I'm not sure if it's a Uti or I don't know. I have to go back up, but it has a lot to do with the Indians about of course skinwalkers, witches, and then you got the aliens involved in this too. And
Yes,
then the house itself is haunted, so
right. And they're, well, it makes it, because everybody looks at, because I think I know the Navajo. I don't. I'm not sure it was the Paiute. I don't remember exactly, but everybody just looks at maybe the last 30 or 40 years of what's going on out there. But that place has been settled for a while, and it makes you wonder how far back were weird things going on. And as far as, but it's got that reputation, obviously because of the name, the Skinwalker thing.
yeah.
But in a very, I don't want to say from a shamanistic point of view. It was more like what you said, when shamans go evil, when they basically in a bad way, and everybody's just, the natives, the native tribes, just like, stay away from that area. Don't go there.
The Navajo don't even talk about it. They're afraid that it will come if they say skinwalker, it will come, will hear them and come right to them.
Yeah.
They do, and they're not the only one talking about this. One thing doing this book. have discovered Native American. I have Native American meat. That's the Sioux, but it has nothing to do with it. It I had to start with the ones in Alaska, the
Mhm.
the Ottermen, because that's the same thing too. That tribe up there says they can't talk about Kushtaka because it'll know it's talking about. They're talking about it, and they'll come to them. And so there, that's where it's, I think, started and went down, of course, because then you got the Skinwalker, the Wendigo, something, the same thing. And there was
Mhm.
another, a little, it was a small bit all I could find about this other one in the state of Washington, Native tribe, that the same thing, that they don't dare say anything because it might make them come to them. So that was
Mhm.
an interesting concept that they're afraid, so they don't dare say the names of the
Right,
creature.
in other words, yeah, like and you see it even now in modern times. It's not like, oh, before the even in modern times, from what I understand, they don't want to talk about it. It's like you said, if you start talking, you're going to invoke it. Before you know it, let's not talk about it. Like let's agree to ignore each other, because if you start talking about, let's say in this case, the skinwalkers, the next thing you know is you're going to have one. You're going to you're going to get that undivided attention from one of these things.
Sometimes things
So,
happen in people's homes. It's happened in stories. I didn't have all the stories I was reading about people having things happen in their homes and to their homes. There's nothing out there, something outside after all that. And the funny thing is, it's also been Caucasian people having experiences too, or other races when they go through the say they drive through the tribal lands, and that includes police, like the local state police, and that they've had experiences. So that kind of makes you think differently when the state police have that experience of something running alongside them, and they can't understand why it's keeping up. It's an animal, right? They're thinking, and it can't
well,
keep
this
up.
this is the thing that's really interesting, is that you ask yourself, well, you know what? If and because this is the thing, when you talk to some of these, all these reservations have their own police departments. Okay,
Right.
that are, the officers are basically, they grew up in this area, and they themselves, when they get these weird calls, I mean, they take it seriously, in other words, is what I'm saying. If they
Yeah.
go out to a call and somebody tells them, I saw this, they don't go like, sure, yeah, one of those things. They're like, they take it very seriously because they grew up
In the
in this, and they don't dismiss it as in, oh, you somebody imagined whatever, or things like that. They This is like a legitimate concern, even for the and I guess what I'm trying to say is, from what I've seen, the interviews I've seen, it's not that they're being patronizing to, let's say, the person that's putting the complaint. They genuinely
yeah.
don't talk about it unless they have to. And if somebody describes something like that, they believe them,
Right.
because
It's just interesting to is it really a witch turning form, or is it something that's another thing that makes me think, as a person, what is it out there? But go figure. But they have
exactly.
all these Native Americans have close to a lot of the same things. Don't talk about that includes the Wendigo, and it's called the otter man. I mean, you would think some of people said, well, why otters? Otters are so cute. I said, not when they're over 6 feet to 8, 10, 9 feet tall. I wouldn't call that cute
Let
anymore.
me ask you, I had never heard of that. I think I heard him mention once. What is that? Or what's the origins on that?
Um, gosh, I would have to look at the name of the tribe. The tribe in it. Let me go in my book real quick. See if I can get to the one with
Sure.
the Kushtaka part. Gotta get past all that. There it is. Oops, I just passed it because I recognize the little otter I took a picture of. Um, this is it. It's the. I hope I can pronounce the name. I hate to be rude to them. The Tringit. T is in capital T Lingit, and that's the tribe that has something to do about the otter men. It's that section. It's
Okay.
in Alaska, but at the Kushtaka, were otters. What do you want to call them? Otter men, whatever they call them. And it's just a big thing there. I mean, land otters, and there's I guess sea otters, but it's land otters. They switch, and they they tell children, don't you dare or go running off and alone without doing it, or the Kushtaka is going to get you, because if you get to hold them, they can be changed.
Oh, okay. Is that like then that's that's what happens? In other words, because you know that all these sometimes either they eat you or take you away. But in this case, what they can transform you
They
into
change,
something
they
like them.
transform you. Yeah, you become one if you're. That's why you
Okay.
don't want to listen to any strange calls in the woods that you think there shouldn't be anybody in there at the time calling your name and that. So
Hmm.
yeah, they're trying to get you to change too. So
That is so interesting because and let me ask you the origin. I guess the did you ever find out how the original otter person or man was? Was it that they were cursed, or how
no,
did this happen to
they've got so many stories in the book.
them? Hmm.
Well, it goes back for a long for a thousand for how long the tribe has been there. So
Okay.
um, it's just the way that it is. I mean, it's just like all the But yeah, the otter man. That's why they threaten the kid. He's almost like the boogeyman. If you think about the boogeyman, don't you
Sure.
go wow, the boogeyman's going to get you. Well, that could be the otter man. You're going to be sorry because you may not be human after a while and stuff like that.
Right, right, right. That's the and it's really funny because you know uh, uh a lot of European um some of their what do you want to call folklore, it's the same thing that if you hear something calling you, like it'll try to lure you in the woods and then you end up getting
Yeah,
lost, that type of thing.
right.
So the it's almost like that's almost like all, I guess I want to say all cultures, especially if we're talking hundreds of years ago or when the origins. And I'm gonna go with I'm sure you've heard of this missing the Dave Politis about the missing 411, all these people that have gone missing.
Right.
And I'm thinking, maybe hundreds of years ago, whenever the origins, whether it was Native American or European or prehistoric, maybe people would go missing. Sometimes for normal, they just got lost. It happens.
Yeah.
But I guess it was one of the worst things because that's where the danger was. Once you got out of sight of either your camp or the fire or whatever, that's it. All bets were off. So if you had a child, this was the best way to keep them close to home, was to tell them, you're going to get carried off. But then you hear sometimes of even adults falling victim to things
Right.
like this, of this nature.
And they do this. They tell them don't. If you hear the voice, and they can tell they'll they're smart. They'll go the opposite way. And talking about even European or anywhere else, the fairy tales, the original fairy
Hmm.
tales, were not made for children. I mean,
Sure.
people think now it's like the Disney one. No, they're not. That was not the real ones. I mean, the Little Red Riding Hood, don't go with the stranger. Like the wolf, and it could
Yes.
possibly even talking about werewolves if you want to say that, but even the bad evil person. It
Hmm.
could happen to you. You could, and they're talking about adults. Don't go out after dark because you don't know what's out there. And things
Right.
like that.
Exactly. Exactly. That's from what I understand, that if you read these fairy tales in their original format, it was like this is not for kids. It
No,
was not anything, but they were very dark. They were very dark. And there was a lot of symbolism also in them, the way they were done. And it makes you think, whether they were real or imagined fears. A lot of cautionary tales, of course. The if you do this, and I know, God, it could go, you could dissect them. But yeah, absolutely what you were saying, Pamela, it's very far from the Disney version of all of these fairy tale stuff and all these princess things and things of this nature. It's like, wow. And you know what, now that you mentioned, I'm going to put this in real quick. The other day I was reading an article, and I don't know if you're familiar with that I don't think it was Disney, it was the Shrek series, when
yeah,
okay. And I was reading that supposedly the princess, she turns out she's an ogre. All right.
yes,
That she had been cursed and she goes into the tower. They were playing off all these different fairy tales. But supposedly, they say if you look at the actual, in those 20 years that she was locked up in this tower, which she was a cannibal because she was eating the knights that would try to go and save her. And they were showing that she was being safeguarded by a dragon. And then they're showing how there's different snippets, but one of the most convincing was there's a part where it shows where there's the dragon had like a big cauldron with like a cookbook open, all right, opened up.
Yeah.
And in it, it shows like a night, but like, in other words, it's a recipe book and basically how to cook a night. So the inference is that princess, I can't remember what her name was when she was a princess, was she lived for 20 years in that
She had to
tower
eat, she had to
eating.
eat something.
Right,
I'm,
exactly.
I'm
She
sure
was
he did. I'm sure he didn't leave the guy that locked her up so she would eventually marry. He's there. I mean, they probably didn't think about sending food to her. Of course, nobody want to go near a dragon anyway. So
right, but I was like, man, I hadn't thought of that. You look at it, it's like cartoonish kind of like, you never, and I was like, okay, you never think about that, that here she was for these 20 years, she was cannibalizing these knights that were coming to rescue her because, and this dragon is like preparing it for her. So yeah, it was a real interesting little article, and it was like, man, some of these things that you just overlook totally in these supposedly, kids movies. It's like, oh, okay. All right, the ogre, princess ogre cannibalizing men for 20 years. But the let me ask you, the when you were doing this research on this last book, was there any type of story or shapeshifter that you came across that you said, man, I have not heard of this before?
gosh, well, there are the owl witches, but that's not the only ones. I think. Well, number one, I would say the Kushtika, but they had something on one of those uh, travel channel paranormal shows, which actually
Hmm.
is the Kushtika at one point. But one I would think, let me look at my stuff, probably could be one of the owl people, but there's a couple of other creatures too. Let's see if I can go to the chapters here. Which one what I got?
Right, because you
Um,
mean,
Probably the owl women. They're definitely they're witches, but they shapeshift into owls is what they do, and some of them
okay,
are formidable too. I mean, I guess if you become a giant big owl, that's probably creepy enough. But there's that.
let me tell you, those things can be impressive. I've got a huge owl that comes because I have these huge oaks on my property, and
Screech owls.
every once in a while it goes hunting in my, from my trees, and that thing is huge. And it's impressive.
I grew up in California, and I remember apartment. We had to be careful. There was a bush, and there was two screech owls. One was small, but the
Hmm.
other one was super big. And you're thinking, I'm not going to go near that big screech owl. It might just bite me or pick me.
Right,
But
yeah,
yeah, I
they're
think another one I didn't understand. Where is it at? That I thought was interesting was the badger one at the
okay.
last chapter. That's another one, and it's funny because Lakota, I have Sioux in me. Well, my Sioux was the Hunkapapas, and they're still in Nebraska, but it's still the same. I'm sure they're all put together up there anyway. And they
Hmm.
regard the badger as the earth animal. A lot of it says a lot of the shamans use it, but that was one I didn't understand. I didn't know that they used the badger a lot, and that was into shape shifting. So that was one I didn't know. A lot of the others I kind of came across both, and the one other one I said that you don't dare call I can't pronounce Juge, whatever it is, in state of Washington, that native tribe does it. That one I didn't hear about either. But then it was the same as it's almost like the Wendigo and cannibalism. So
Hmm.
they all seem to have some of the same stuff, some of it sometimes.
Right, because
But
badger people don't realize badgers are very fierce, man. They're dangerous animals.
well, yeah, but that's what they believe. They say that it's also a lot of other things. That's why the shamans like to have that as a spirit animal, I gather. But
Right. Well, because in some cases, and this is the thing that, some people, and especially about among natives, sometimes they would have, if you want to call them totems, or they would have like certain things about a certain animal that they admired, the traits, whether it was a wolf or a bear or whatever, like it was, it was, but there's a difference between the traits of a certain animal being desirable, as in being fierce, for example, or fearless or whatever, to the transformation part, because that is, I guess, even in among these cultures, it was like that's it. You either you lose your humanity, or you're trapped in that body, or something along those lines. Um, that's the feeling I always get from some of these things, where once you go over that line, it's not like, oh, I admire that. Let's say somebody that wears a bear claw, on a necklace to signify, whatever. Um, Once they become that animal, uh, then that's when everything changes, actually becomes it.
Well, that's the berserkers of the Vikings. They
Right,
either
exactly.
they even changed, if not wolves, they were considering them maybe werewolves or werebears.
Hmm.
That's a big
Right.
thing there, werebears, which is a bigger animal to begin with. So,
Right, because from what I understand, even among the Vikings, the berserker was your top tier, like fighting machine, because they were just like nonstop, is from what I understand. I don't know that much about it, but that's what I've always thought, that if you were berserker, even among the Vikings, this was like your fiercest warrior that was difficult. They were like a killing machine, in other words.
right.
So, and of course, they attributed the same thing, like you're saying, the characteristics, like you
Of the
said,
snake.
either to a bear or a wolf, which are very fierce animals. Um, the and it's really when you did you come across any, how the typical, how can I say, like when the werewolf came out, the movies, like the Lon Chaney and all of that,
Yeah.
which is, that it had to be that only silver, what was it, that he had to be killed by somebody who loved him, and by a silver, something like that.
That's probably wrong. Anybody probably kill. As for silver bullets, I mean, there's
Hmm.
stories of some of them. One I remember years ago I read, supposed to be true, that the guy used a silver sword. So, yeah, yeah. But I don't know if the silver sword had anything to do with it or just been a chop off a head. Silver is a soft uh, metal anyway, so I don't know per se if that really, really, really works. But yeah, silver is supposed to be a thing. Um, a lot of that, I think, is the bullet thing started with the movies more.
Right, I
Um,
know and I was,
some of that is movie. There's movie stuff. People got it
yeah.
mixed up. But there's now also the people that do that, uh, almost like Dungeon Dragon, but they use to do about White Wolf is the name of the company, but talking about werewolves and stuff and their terms. And so some of that stuff they use isn't exactly what you read in the old stories about how they came. It's just like vampires. People talk about the zombies, which the zombies that we're seeing on Walking Dead aren't really zombies. Zombies are Haitian with something from pufferfish,
Right.
but the undead is all over. It's been there for centuries, and actually in Eastern Europe, I read this years ago, and that's what struck me. They didn't just drink. First, they came back after the family. It was never
Hmm.
anybody else. It took over the years they changed that, but first it was, come back to their loved ones. Which actually there was a TV series, The Strain, that they
I
used.
God,
That
I saw
that
that.
that was really creepy. They almost look creepy too, but they did do the part coming back for the loved ones.
Hmm.
So that's what they did in Eastern Europe, and they didn't just drink blood; they ate flesh, which almost sounds
Right.
like the zombies of all these movies now, right?
Sure. Yes.
So,
Yes.
I pointed that out to everybody. I says, we're talking about zombies, which is actually a Haitian thing,
Hmm.
and they puffer fish, and I don't think they really killed them. I know they say they think they did, but I'm sure the puffer fish could do things to make it look like, and then control them.
Sure. Let's
But,
face it,
yeah,
if you're in a country where, you look like maybe your respiration or something, you're like, he's dead, okay, let's bury him. And out there, people don't understand. If you're living in a tropical climate, you need to bury a body quick,
right.
because that thing goes bad very quickly.
Well, the puffer
So,
fish, whatever they do to it, probably can cause it to look like similarly they're
right, yeah,
dead.
that's from my understanding. It
But
it paralyzes, like, so the person is like, looks like they're dead. And I think, I don't know if it's respiration. Everything is so slow or so low that for somebody, and I don't know, it's from what it simulates like this person is dead.
And then they come back to life, and the thing makes them controllable for a
Right.
while until, like, one sister said she ran into her brother years later, and he said he had been done like that to her. And so yeah, that's a big thing. That so when they turned the term zombies to something that originally uh, he actually turned it into, actually was thinking of something else to use. But well, here it is, vampires in Eastern Europe were eaten, and the old way back, not just blood but flesh, shows you that all undead do that. They're not zombies. It's just whatever they are, vampires or whatever undead. I mean,
Right, because they've people don't realize, because everybody, like you pointed out, everybody thinks of Dracula and Bram Stoker, which, by the way, today, which is May 26th, is Dracula Day, official Dracula Day, by the way.
oh, I feel like my
And
husband's birthday today too. So
really,
it's
it's
on
today.
there.
Tell them they're
Yeah,
in the UK, Whitney Abbey, which they're saying supposedly they chose today because today in 1897 was when the novel was published. Okay. And in the UK, they're having a big celebration. They're trying to get over 1,000 people to dress as vampires because, from what I understand, Whitby Abbey is the inspiration that Bram Stoker used for the Abbey, the setting of
right.
Carfax, in other words, for his novel. So everybody in the UK is partying dressed like a vampire in the UK. But what I was going to say is, a lot of people think of the modern vampire story as the Bram Stoker Dracula thing. But previous to that, they've excavated and they found what they call deviant burials,
Right.
whereas they would put things on people's bodies, just exactly like what you're describing, to make sure they didn't rise from the dead. In other words, this was a belief, in a lot of these countries, as far as, like you said, people rising from the dead to come back either to their family or to eat, whatever it is. Um, because the vampire wasn't just the blood sucking thing; it was the consumption of the living.
Right.
Uh, So there was a big belief in that long before, and from what I understand, maybe this was what Bram Stoker was finding when he did his research. Maybe that's part of it. Who knows?
The
But
the the great nephew of Bram Stoker. He's also There is also a son, but the great
hmm
nephew lives in South Carolina, and he's with the Horror Writer Association. So I met him, and he
oh,
said
okay,
his uncle actually used a lot of the ideas, believe it or not, for the North New England vampire stories with the
okay,
bells on the top of the graves. That's one of the big things. If they woke, because people woke up and they weren't really dead. They didn't have any way to prove
yeah,
somebody's dead, right? And they didn't. At least back then, they didn't stuff. Now, if they put stuff in people's body, you're not going to come back at
right.
all.
The embalming process. Yeah,
Right.
if you're not dead, you're
So
going to be dead.
so they rang bells. Actually, in Virginia, here's an interesting thing, and I'm thinking that's all
Mhm.
connected to that. Some were buried. I've been found buried standing up. Their coffin, they're standing up in the grave, not laying
Wow, I
down.
hadn't heard that.
So that's like I'm a feeling that has the same thing as the bell ringing. One of them is a Civil War general who died. He was buried at one place that's a haunted place. Then he was buried at Hollywood Cemetery. Then they moved him and buried him under a statue. Now they're going to get rid of the statue, the whole thing. So I don't know what they're going to do with the body. They're probably going to put it back to Hollywood. I mean, he was buried there the second time, but he was buried standing up. So I'm always wondering, is he still? I wonder if they buried him standing up on that statue. If they were taking it down, I wouldn't mind going there and say, "Can I see if he was buried standing up, or
Yeah.
did they not do that?" But that's what he was. They buried him standing up, and they buried some others standing up. And they actually had one guy that died, and he had his body put in his mausoleum on
hmm
on a chair, rock chair, whatever, facing his plantation, so he can make his slaves feel nervous about that, everything.
Oh
When
my
the other
God.
lady took over it, and they kept telling her this, and she wasn't a family member, but she told her, she thought, well, that can't be true, right? Why would anybody do it? So she went out and found them. They broke into them, and they found Of course, a lot of the stuff had broken down. It's been years, but they found bones on top of it, so it was obviously true. He was sitting on
Right.
it. That was kind of that was really creepy.
That but you know what? And but it points to that people really at that time really had a big fear of being buried alive. It wasn't like, oh, this just happened once. This it was prevalent enough that people were like, which to me, of course, is a real fear. It was that the last thing they wanted to do was wake up in a coffin and slowly die to death, slowly inside, confined, So this was a real fear back then.
It happened even in the early 1900s. My mother told me a story from, at that time it was Czechoslovakia. So I'm half on her side Czech and Slovakian. But
Okay.
there was, she was telling me a story about a funeral her mother told her, that they were walking along, and it was in Czech, Prague, I think. And they suddenly heard a knock, 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 knock. And they stopped, and they're looking funny, the pallbearers. And again, they hear a more frantic, and he
Oh my
dropped
God.
the thing and got scared and dropped it and ran off. But he probably was somebody just came back because he had been unconscious. This was so they were still freaked out about it, so they ran off. Instead of thinking,
Yes.
well, maybe somebody actually wasn't dead. Let's check this. No, they didn't say that. They dropped it and ran.
No, nobody wanted to be that person. It's like, you know what? I'll, I'll go have somebody check it out in the morning or something. No, it was because a lot of people, it wasn't the first thing that came to mind. It wasn't like you said, this is somebody that was buried alive. It's like, no, somebody's come back from the dead and they're coming to get me. All right. Or something like that.
They're
A lot
killing
of
him
those.
while he's still, and he's not even buried yet. They're carrying the coffin, and it's doing that. So that, yeah.
Yeah. Back then also, they had the problem with graves being robbed for the bodies for these universities. That was a big thing also that people had to deal with grave robbing.
And
No.
if they did it
So
right, it didn't look like grave robbing. Maybe it'd make people think that somebody came back from the dead too, if they thought about
sure.
it.
Sure. Exactly. Exactly. And from what I understand, usually, which of course is that they would the ones the grave robbing was from fresh graves, in other words, because they had to get these bodies to, the certain place with fresh, I guess is what I'm trying to say, so that they could be dissected. So I know that that was another big problem with
And if we'll talk about vampires, we can connect werewolves with it, because that was a
okay.
belief that some people believe that if a werewolf died, wasn't regular, I guess, wasn't killed,
Mhm.
say like the normal way. If he just
Right.
died somehow, maybe he would come back as a vampire.
Oh, really?
Yeah, that
I
was
hadn't heard of that. That's
that was a
interesting.
belief. Some beliefs, I think in Europe, so they believed in that.
So
But
that was this was like the next level punishment.
I
If
guess
you're
you were
not
going to become an undead vampire.
right, right. And see, this is the thing that I was one time I heard, as far as if we go with the werewolf and the vampire, if you were a werewolf and we go with the thing of that you transform only during the phases of the moon, basically you could pass for normal for the good portion of the month. You could go around daytime. You could pretend to have a normal life. Whereas if you're a vampire, that's it. You can't go out in daylight, you can't pretend to be human, et cetera, et cetera. So in a way you almost think like, yeah, I could see where going from werewolf to vampire, that's it. Any
But,
pretense that human life is gone.
but there's some in the story, not all have to do with the full moon actually at all, that
Right.
they can
Okay.
turn at any night. It was nighttime they turned. So,
Right. And it's
seems like
almost you want
night was
to
a bad thing, I guess.
right. Well, almost like by will, in other words. Because when you read those stories with the phases of the moon, it's almost like it was a punishment. It was like I have to endure these whatever 3 4 days, whatever the full moon was, and then it's over. In other words, they wouldn't voluntarily turn into a werewolf. It's that they turned without wanting to. So, but yeah, but then of course, if you're doing it because either like you were saying, it was a power trip, or because they're dabbling in occult practices that allows them to do this,
Wearing a
then of course,
wolf skin belt. There's actually
mm,
even a story where I think someone found They were looking for somebody, and they found some wolf skin cloaks, and they put it on the two brothers, and they changed into a pair of wolves, and they couldn't change back until they could get that off them. Kind of interesting. They were stuck because they
Right.
didn't know how to do it, but it was they were checking on somebody about that, and here they put the cloaks on, and that's how they changed it to wolves. I guess the other people that own the place.
That's interesting. Or makes you wonder, let me pass the curse on. Whoever wears this coat or whatever, or this wolf skin, that's the next person that is, now is cursed with like whoever wears the skin, that's it. It's tag, it's your turn. So that's a very um and people p- there's a story that Saint Christopher, which is known as, among as the patron saint of travelers and policemen and all that, in some of the gospels, some that they say that that he was a cenotaph, in other words, a dog head. All right.
That's in the whole thing with my first chapter. There were a lot of
Really?
dog heads. There were a lot of, there's even in Greece, there was supposedly an island of dog-headed people. That's interesting.
Right.
They call them dog-headed. Now, I don't know if they meant really dog-headed or looked like a wolf-headed. That was interesting, but what kind of dog-headed? That's the whole thing with the dog man. A lot of them say, oh, they're not like wolves. Wolves have long snouts. Now, let me tell you, I had a Siberian Husky, a big
Mm-hmm.
one, and the timber wolf in my book that I took a picture of at the local zoo, and my
Okay.
dog could have been alike, same length of snout. So that's
Okay.
a misnomer for these dog men hunters to say, "Oh, we call them dogmen because they have a shorter snout." No, dog, at least if it's got the same length as uh, my dog has proven they can have the same length as a wolf. And the only ones that would have shorter snout anyway, let's talk about, would probably be something like Rottweilers or the dogs with
Mm-hmm.
the problem, the bulldogs and that they can't actually breed because of that either.
Right. And
So
that's
they're trying to say, but yet they're telling description everything else, pointed ears, which is wolf-like, or like my
mm-hmm.
Siberian, they're normal.
Right.
I mean, the whole thing else is quite close to a werewolf, and would look. I don't know. I mean, go figure. It's either
Okay.
they seeing a wolf man or they're seeing somebody like the wolf man and the Lon Chaney. Yeah, he hardly had a snout. He had a small one because he was human, ape-like turning. So I don't know. I mean, but that's what they say. I probably would disagree with them. I said, is it a dog man? Is it a wolf man? It's probably the same thing. But they mentioned that in the old, a lot of old places. That St. Christopher, I read that in the
Right.
book.
Right. In some
Uh,
Eastern Orthodox depictions, he's shown as getting a dog head. And when I saw that the first time, I was like, huh? What?
At least he had something misformed. Maybe it was born that way and it looked kind of odd. Maybe that could be it to their
Huh?
reasoning for that. That's all I'm thinking. Probably that might be so true if they did it by accident. It could have been a birth thing. But
Sure.
the group once there's a whole island of dog-headed men, and yeah, there
Mhm.
was a lot over in Europe talking about dog-headed men.
Sure.
They weren't
Absolutely.
women; they were mostly dog-headed men.
Well, and then, you go to the point where, and I know you mentioned it earlier, and it sounds like you read about it, where there's that story in early Greece where Zeus basically uh
Cursed Lycos
cursed the
because
Lycos to becoming a werewolf because he had sacrificed his own son to him. Something
and
along those lines.
and let Zeus eat the meat without the what he
Right.
was eating.
Exactly. So, I mean, those stories have been around for a long time, as far as, like you said, going back. And because it's almost like when they had identified, and I'm again, this is, God, so long, so many hundreds of years ago, when they describe Saint Christopher, it was like he came from a land that was known to have dog-headed people. In other words, it wasn't, because I thought the same thing. Like, was this maybe somebody that was born with a misshapen head or some weird abnormality that made them look dog-like?
I would
But
just
then
think,
it's,
I don't
you know,
know.
It's almost like he came from a land that was known to produce people like this, and it's like, okay, maybe there's something in that area of the people, some genetic trait that I was like, but then of course it's open to interpretation. But I'm going to tell a real short story about, because I used to do hypnotherapy for many years, and one year, this was a while back, I closed down my hypnosis center because I can't do everything at once. But anyway, one time I had I had a gentleman call me on the phone. And you would usually get these calls, and I had this gentleman call me and say, "Look, can you hypnotize me to forget something, like erase it from my mind?" And I was like, I usually had the different call. I would get a call like, "Hey, I can't remember where I hid my jewelry,"
Right.
or things like that. I said, "No, I can't. I can relax you. I know." He sounded like real edgy and anxious. And I said, I can relax you. If there's something that's some memory that's makes you anxious, maybe we could help relax you with hypnosis, but I can't make you forget it. I can't erase it from your memory, which is basically what he was wanting me to do. I said, but can you tell me what it is that, it's maybe something that I can help you with? So this man, by the way, on the phone tells me, and you can tell he's being very cautious. He tells me the story. And again, he's not telling, I have a feeling he's calling me from out of state, but again, I can't confirm that. He tells me he's going down a highway. It's forested. And he says it's an area where he knows that there was a lot of deer. So he says, I was driving along on the slow side because the last thing I wanted was um, like a deer to jump out. In
Right.
other words, it wasn't a heavily traveled road. It wasn't like a highway, like a regular highway. And he says, I was riding it slow because at night, these deers are known to jump from the embankment over the road into the other side.
Right.
So he says that all of a sudden, he sees a deer and it's coming up, and he's like, he knows it. And he says, this thing is like coming. He says he speeds out from the tree line, stops, and he's thinking, now this thing is being chased. Like, what's going on? And he says he's already slowing down, and this thing just bounds up, and he sees something coming from behind it, chasing it. So from what he described, that I guess there was like an embankment that leads up from that
Yeah.
field, from the tree line up to the roadway, and he sees something. He says, I see something pursuing it. And I'm thinking, it was big and hairy. He says, wolf. He says, I was thinking bear. He says, this is the first thing. And he says that when this thing comes up the crest of the embankment, it stands up on two legs. He says, I'm watching this thing because by now my headlights are on it.
Um,
Okay. And he described the dog man. And he says that he says that's the part that tripped him out totally, was when this thing got up on its hind legs. Because when it came across through the field, that little from the tree line, it was on
yeah.
fours, and then it got up, crossed the tier, kept going, crossed over the road on two legs, and then just bound off, and then on four kept going into the other woods that were on the other side of the roadway.
Right.
Till coming back, basically, this man, his reality had been so, I'm going to use the word fractured by this sighting, that he says he says, I'm having a hard time sleeping, I'm anxious, it altered his sense of reality so badly that he wanted to see if I could hypnotize him, just forget it. He, it was like, I wish I could go back to before I saw this. How's that?
Yeah.
you know and we worked on it, and I said, look, I can't do that, but I can give you, and I told him, because I told him I had other instances for other clients had called me for something similar. I said, look, I can't tell you what it is because I don't know. I will tell you this. I've spoken to people who have similar sightings like you. Okay, so I don't want you to think like the universe is picking on you kind of thing. I don't know what it is. And, we worked on some relaxation, but that's a short story about somebody that called me that like I said, it was very unusual because usually people would call me to get hypnotized to remember things. All right. And that's the first time I had somebody call me to say, I want you to erase my memory about this little date or this night or this hour, minutes or whatever. And that was the story he told me. And it was like, and I know he was very hesitant at first, because he was afraid that I was gonna be like crack up or go, "You're crazy." And I said, "Look, sir, I've heard a," and I can't remember. He gave me a name, but it was a real generic name. I'm sure it wasn't even his real name. And I said, "Look, I've heard a lot of things. I'm not going to wig out on you. I'm not going to laugh. I'm not going to make fun of you. I'm not going to think you're crazy. Why don't you tell me what it is you're trying to forget?" And that's when he told me that story. And so there you go. I mean, you could tell
Yeah,
by the way when he talked to me, this was somebody that had been profoundly affected by what he saw.
that was something he doesn't probably believe in normally, and just see it is a
Oh,
different.
absolutely not. This
It's like,
guy was just trying to go down a road hoping I don't want to run over a deer and smash up my car. That's what he was thinking. He told me. He goes, "I was going slow because this
yeah,
area after dark is known for deer bounding over the roadway, and the last thing I wanted to do was hit a deer."
I live in an area like this, so I understand where he's coming from.
Yeah.
And Charles City's is like that. That's why I said you don't hope you don't see Bigfoot because they have deer and stuff like that. In fact, even dogs that were dumped after hunting, we actually clipped one by accident. We didn't expect it. Uh, but yeah, that would be probably rough on somebody that's just beyond their normal sphere of
Oh, yeah.
something
Mhm.
out that looks like it should be in a movie and not.
Right. Well, the feeling you get when you speak to somebody like this is if this is possible, what else in this world is stuff that I think is just a Hollywood could be just a Hollywood film is possible then. You see, it opens it expands your horizons to places you don't want to go.
You know,
And
I have a weird theory, and this is probably the writer in me because I'm thinking that would make a good idea for a story. I mean, Stephen King made one, The Mist. Let's talk about
mhm,
alternate, another universe. What if some of these things are that
sure.
coming? I mean, okay, Bigfoot. You could probably explain we did have gigantic apes, and some point we had to have something. I mean, they couldn't have just be everywhere else in the world and not here at some point.
Right.
But even that, some of them disappear, and maybe same thing with the dogmen. Maybe they, it's like ghost. We know that's another dimension. I read actually two times in my life. The first time I read it was years and years ago that heaven and hell are really the same as we are right here, another dimension. It's not like
Mhm,
a lot of people. In fact, I had somebody yelling at me. She was Baptist, and this was in
mhm.
California, and she believed in a golden kingdom. I said, "Well, this is not what Oh no, I don't want to hear it." Da, da, da. I said, "And it's
Yes.
not really up there, and it's not really down there, because all we're going to find is molten lava and whatever else our Earth has."
Right.
So yeah, dimensional, and there is dimensions. I mean, you got the one, two, and three, and we're the third dimension. Go on. What's the next through that would fit whatever? Or alternate universe. I mean, alternate worlds. I mean, that's another theory. You see this in movies, but you also see that as theories. So
Right, right. And this is the thing, they turned back the CERN, the Hadron, it's Collider out in what is it, Switzerland or one of these, which had been closed down for 3 days. I mean, 3 years. And one of the things that people say that they fear is that this thing could do exactly what you just said, Pam, which is to open a portal or a rip into another dimension. In other words, that what, and then you do get the thing of like that there's other natural occurring portals, whether
right.
they open and close on a time schedule or timetable, or whether they're just rips that come and go. And then, like you said, that mist, that's a great example where things come through there that, which is, how sometimes there's sightings of certain animals or cryptids for just a bunch of people see it and then it's never seen again. It's like a moment. And it's almost like it came and went and then that's it, it's gone. It's never seen again, but it's witnessed by a bunch of people, even credible people. And are we talking about a rip where something came through and one of two things, it was either able to go back or for some reason it couldn't exist much, a length of time here in our world for whatever reason. It just, maybe it couldn't, it was too alien for it. I don't know. But
Or we can even talk that about UFOs. If you think about,
sure.
are they from other planets, or maybe, of course, that could be a warp. tunnel, talking about that.
Mhm.
But
Sure.
or can some of them actually come from other? And now that the military actually believes it, because they said some they can figure out, you know, but some they can't. I mean, the lights and splitting in half, that's probably what's interesting, and that they can do that. And
But you
where
know
they're
what?
coming,
Let me ask you what you think, even though they had that, what was it, last week? They had a Senate hearing about UFOs, something they hadn't done in 50 years. And I'm like, why now? Like, you guys have spent the last 60 years telling everybody it was weather balloons below Mike. It's like, why
I'm
now?
thinking that that now that they're scared. First, they
Oh,
might think it's somebody else has more power and has abilities. I don't think that at this point. I think we would know at some point. And so
yeah.
far, what we have seen terrorize, Putin has a lousy army now. He's let it go to pot. The other guy's doing missiles, and China, I don't think, is hiding it much at some point
Well,
either. That we
and
can't
and
figure things out.
and this is the thing, because let's not go into ancient aliens or nothing like that. We're talking about modern history as in 50, 60 years. Yes, you have your people that do see something that's not really that. You have your people that are just, they're like they've lost grip on reality, but there's a lot of credible witnesses.
I'm one
Credible
of them.
witnesses.
I'm one of them. This is
Oh
just
my God, say that.
for
What?
real. Okay, there's two happenings. The second one was in Elkhorn, California at night. The way the thing up and with friends of mine, which is into
Okay.
they're Star Trek, but they're into science fiction. Well, my
Okay.
husband was with me at that time, so he saw that too. Now the first one though was the one that was interesting. It was daytime, afternoon, clear skies in Sacramento. Okay, our backyard was actually toward the back was part of was Stockton, California. The front was the city. The one was the country. So my father's under the tree under the bench he made, so he doesn't see anything. And my dogs and the pet pen. My mother and I are sitting on the back porch. My mother points up and says, "What the heck is that?" And I look up. I'm in third grade. I'm not really stupid. I'm actually advanced for my age in a lot of things. I can tell you that. So when I saw it, I got off the steps and went under it. Number one, it was low enough to say it was big. Okay. It was big. It
All
was
right.
round. It was not anything. It was not a plane, not in the early 60s. Come on. This was
Right.
definitely nothing from the early 60s. It was scarlet red and silver, but they colors when they met together, it was almost weird. They blended, and it made a sound. It was odd. To this day, I remember that sound. I can't say how I did it, but I remember this to this day. And I'm standing up looking at it, and it's passing over us as slow as can be. Like, I don't care who sees me. That's the attitude. Afternoon, bright sunlight, low enough to the ground. Okay, to show how
Okay.
big it was. This was I wish I back then you didn't have phone cameras. We didn't even have camera in our
Oh,
house, my parents. But I would love to have taken my phone with that sucker and a video of it passing over like that because I would have. But it was that slow and like I don't care that. And I went to tell a friend afterwards. It disappeared. Wherever it went over our house and disappeared. And a friend of mine said, "Oh, tell that cop." I said, "Really? I'm going to tell a policeman." And he said that I should tell
yeah.
people think I'm crazy
Yeah.
pulling his leg because I'm a kid. But to this day, I remember that, and it was freaky. It was like, and my mother saw it
Good.
too. It was not just me, you know. What
Right.
the heck is that? That's what she was wondering. And
Exactly.
I said, Mom, I think we saw a what they call a UFO flying saucer. Is that what they call them? It was round. It was round. I tried to see look around and see if I could see anything on top of, but it was round. That was not a plane. I don't think I
Well,
knew what they had. I mean, I'm not stupid. I read back then. I saw movies. There was nothing close to a plane shape at all in that time era. If you look it up. So what was it? It was not a balloon either. It made sound like engine of something.
right. And this is the thing, that for all the reports that they have, when I mean reports as in they reported to somebody, do you know how many reports are just like what you just described? People that for whatever reason, they never say anything. So, okay, there's so many reports that are known, and let's not even go to the ones that have never been written down, described, passed down, like what you just described. There's thousands and thousands and thousands. What, you're going to tell me everybody was seeing a weather balloon, or they lost touch with reality, or it's like, come on, if you take that percentage out of the equation, that leaves, that's what I'm saying. It's like, that's why a question is like, after so many years of basically, from what I understand, if you had some type of responsible um, position, whether it's in the military or policeman or something, it was like a career killer. If you started talking about the UFO you saw, it was like, shut up, don't talk about that, because you're going to be known as that guy. And
But
all
they
of a
had
sudden, you get these people, and it's like, I don't know. There's some. I'm just like, let's
they
see what
had
comes of
Blue
this.
Book for years. They had stuff. Where are they getting these stories? Not just modern stuff.
Sure,
Okay, I can
exactly.
see the current pilots, and I believe what they're saying.
Oh, sure,
They
I
can't
do.
explain it. But
But
I
from what I understand, they've been seeing this for a long time.
and,
Way.
and and it was funny because they had one of the little shows on, and one guy, Josh Gates, he says,
Hmm.
"Oh, why are nobody has any seen all this before?" And I yelled at the TV screen. Wish she could have heard me. It's called Blue Book. Air Force,
Yeah,
Blue Book. I
yeah,
mean, I knew that growing
yes,
up. So, and this was no weather balloon. This was metal. It was made up. That I
yeah.
can tell you too. Whatever kind of metal it was, I guess.
Mhm.
But
Yeah.
it was not a balloon.
Well, I read, my youngest son served. He was in the Navy, and he served on the USS Ronald Reagan CVS 76 out of ports out of Coronado Island. And I was reading this article. He went in 2005, but in 2003, 2004, on that very ship, which, by the way, I think it was launched like 2001. It was like a modern carrier. They had a 2-day sighting of what they called a ball of light that followed the ship, and it was like, the people that described it, that they interviewed them not too long ago. These people have left the Navy and everything. It didn't. It had soft edges. Like when something is flaming, and
Yeah,
it was like an orange gold color. And the people some of them, if they do, like, I want to say guard duty. I know that's not what it's called, but they're supposed to keep a log. And some of them, some gave their names, other remained anonymous, and they said, we were told in some instances that they called up their superiors, like, hey, what's this ball of light hanging out over the ship? Because they're out at sea, by the way.
yeah.
They were doing these maneuvers that they checked the ship. You know how they have, and they're being
I
told by
think I know where that's from because my husband was probably stationed there, North Island,
no,
the
it was in
carrier.
Coronado Island, right outside of San Diego on
Yeah,
California coast.
that would be. They were probably stationed at North Island. That's where the carriers were. Because my husband's ship was as big as a carrier. It was a not. It was a
What happened was that it was originally, since the ship had just been
left
built
port.
or
Yeah, they
launched,
built
it
them.
had been come out of Norfolk, out of Virginia. Okay. And eventually it was transferred. It had to go around the Cape and come to dock, and then it was docked. I think it was in 2004 out of Coronado Island. But at that time, it was in transition, coming out of Norfolk to go over there.
Yeah.
And basically, these people are describing where their higher ups, they dismissed it, and others who would fill out the logbooks that they're supposed to do, like what they were told to tear out the pages. Okay, they were like, you follow orders, but they themselves were like, okay, and nothing came of it. But this thing followed them around for a couple of days or hours. It was, I know it was overnight, that it was with the ship, like overnight. Then it came closer and it went far away, and none of them. In other words, not only were they kind of wigged out, what wigged them out was that the people up the food chain on the ship were like pretending like this is normal. And that was, I thought that I had just read this. This came out not too long ago, that this happened like in 03, 04.
Oh, they're looking back now to see which ones are real, and they're starting to say there's some they can't predict what they can't even say what it is. They can't figure out what it is. They're acting. What's bugging me? They're acting like they're scared. That's a danger to the government. I said, number one, they've been here for a long time. People had experiences, not just the military. I know you're just trying to deny the rest of
Mhm.
us, but I remember what I saw. If if it wanted to, that thing was so low to the ground, it could have blasted us real easy, my house, and
Sure.
that was it. I mean,
And
I'm thinking they're watching us to see what we're probably more danger to ourselves
well,
than
when I was reading the article, I'm thinking to myself, I remember this was I'd say, like I said, 0304. I'm thinking, man, 2001 we had just had 9/11. You would have think that a nuclear ship like this one, a carrier, see something like this, and they would have gone on a full alert. 9/11 had just occurred 2 years before or 3 years before.
yeah.
Okay, so you would think this something like this would have been like what? And the people that were there that were serving, they couldn't understand why it was being ignored, or they were told to basically pull out, rip out log pages. Like in other words, no written, I guess, evidence or recording that they had sighted this close to the ship. So I don't know. Very, very, very unusual.
I think
Um,
they're learning to not deny it anymore. I'm pretty sure the military's had enough experiences of stuff
of
like that.
course, of
I
course.
mean, if I was another planet and I wanted to worry about human beings, what we're doing stuff now, we'd be watching everybody's military. I'm sure they're all over. The other countries, some countries have said things, but some of them we know aren't going to tell us anything. I wouldn't
Yeah,
be surprised if North Korea's been watched really careful with all those missiles. So
all those things, all those things. I guess eventually, let's see. Hopefully, like I say, I hope in my lifetime somebody comes out and says the truth. Sometimes that's really hard to come by. But
well,
anyway,
they're just not calling it aliens. They said it's not. We can't say it's aliens.
well, now
We can't.
and now they're not calling them UFOs; they're calling them UAPs. It was like, oh,
You-
stop it! They're
you-
UFOs. Why can't you keep calling them UFOs? It's like,
That's what they were called back in Blue Book. So I
yeah,
guess
I
they.
know. It's like, why are you trying to redefine them? UAPs, it's like
Well,
UFOs. Everyone.
I guess they wanted to say that we're saying the truth. That it's UAFs. Okay, well, wouldn't it be easier just to call them UFOs? What's the difference? It's an unidentified flying object. It's all you know. You know.
Exactly. Exactly. Again, Pamela, thank you so much. It has been absolutely wonderful to talk to you. Do you have, for my podcast listeners, what's a website that they can find your work at?
My website, you can check all my both fiction and nonfiction stuff and everything else, is https dot Pamela K Kinney PamelaKinney.com.
Okay, and I'm going to have a
Um,
link to in the credits of the show. And let me ask you, can they find you on Amazon or only on your? And the reason why I'm asking you this is that I know
werewolf, Dogmen, and other shapeshifters are everywhere. She got through
Okay,
Ingrams. That was the
okay,
best thing she ever did. And so it's not just Amazon. Right now, I can tell it's been selling because Amazon posts all this stuff and posts it's been in the top 100 a lot, whether it's the Kindle or the
right.
regular paperback. But it's on Barnes and Noble. It's at Books a Million. It's at indiebound.org for independent press books. It's at bookshop.org, which helps a lot of bookstores, indie
Okay,
ones like that. So that money always goes that, and their bookstore can order it in because I made sure. She said it's supposed to be able to. So I
mm-hmm.
asked them when I'm doing a book signing in July 2nd, Book Warehouse in Williamsburg. I'm going to do my usual Virginia Haunted Historic Triangle and the new book. And he says, yeah, they've had theirs in the main warehouse because they're like an indie bookstore, but a chain version. So they
Okay,
can order it through Ingram's. And
okay,
if they
okay.
want to just
So
go to
they
their
can
book.
find you there. Are you working? Do you have any plan? Because I know you said something. I'm working on two other books. Do you? Are you working on something now that you're going to publish
I just
this year?
finished a short story and submitted for a call. Vampire one, by the way. That's all I'm going to say because I hope the people aren't listening because they're supposed to.
Okay.
It was a blind call. That's all I'm going to say. But
Are we
I'm
talking
going
fiction
back.
or nonfiction?
It's fiction.
Okay.
I'm going back to a lot of my fiction. I have another one that was I had done that with a group of us beta reading each other, and the last one I made it into it. Three of us only made into it of our group that made into this anthology coming out later about called Bloody Rock, like taking rock and roll or songs in the 50s, 60s, and 70s.
Uh-huh.
I got to get out of this place, and it's set with Dismal Swamp and the Dismal Swamp ghosts, which is haunted, and so it's all in
Wow.
there. But anyway, right now I'm going to try and get back to a couple of novels, sequels. But this
Okay.
weekend, I'm actually going to be selling at Sage Paracon at the Bell Grove Plantation Bed and Breakfast in King George, Virginia. So it's
Wow.
Saturday and Sunday.
Okay. God, that is fantastic. All right. See, a woman after my own heart. It's like, you're finishing one book and you're like, okay, I'm already percolating my other story up here, which is, let me tell you, it's food for thought, all these things that are going on, and then you weave them into the stories, which is, you know, I don't know. I'm into fantasy, sci-fi slash supernatural thriller slash, yeah. That
Well, that's
that's
another
that.
reason I brought this book, not just for me, of course, to have all that on
Hmm.
hand. I buy those kind of books when you're writing that fiction, but
Yeah.
this is for writers. I've had writers buying this, so I'm hoping it
Right.
inspires them to write their next whatever story out of that.
Yeah. Sure. Of course. Yeah. I was gonna say that's my bag, baby. Again, thank you so much. It has been absolutely wonderful to speak to you. Take care, Pamela.
Thank you, and thank you for having me.
On the contrary, my pleasure. Bye bye.
Bye bye.
Wow. It has been absolutely wonderful to talk to her. What do you think? Let me tell you. And you know what? And this is the thing, when you go back and you do research, whether it's werewolves or dogmen or vampires, and you look at some of these old stories, whether they're hundreds or thousands of years old, you know, it's really easy to fall into the mindset, these were superstitious people, or they're making stuff up, or they were mistaken. Um, you know, Stop right there. That's like being an intellectual snob about these things. Um, Sometimes people are describing literally what they saw, or the best they know how to describe it. And just because we can't put a handle on it, like, no, something like that can't exist, that doesn't mean it didn't back then. All right. And like I said, that they have those examples of deviant burials where they have, like in Romania and Poland, I mean, in Italy, all over the place, people that were buried with certain items inside their graves, which was to hold them in the earth. There was one where they would put a sickle or a stone in the mouth, or different things, depending on what part of the world it was, which was basically a way to make sure that this person didn't rise from the dead and basically victimize the living. That was always the fear. All right. And it makes you think, okay, at what point did these things start? Because we're not talking here where these people are thinking a ghost. They're not talking about something that's ethereal, as in you're going to get haunted by whatever. They were talking about the corpse reanimating and coming out from the grave, and what, whether you want to call it eating them, drinking their blood, the vampire version, things of this nature. In other words, there was belief in this, and it's surprising when they go through these old cemeteries that that they open up and they examine and they see all these things, and uh, it, and in some cases they find, for example, even sometimes, how can I say it? People would be even as punishment. Sometimes people would be buried certain ways to almost like punish them in death. Like they would either be buried like face down, or the grave would be pointing in the wrong direction. Contrary to whatever the popular belief was, as is in this was the best way to make sure you got to the other side, whatever the other side was for that culture, whether it was heaven or reincarnation, whatever it was. There was certain things that you would do to a body basically to stop it from continuing on that trip. But then, like I said, the deviant barrels wasn't the spirit thing. It was a reanimated dead person that's going to come back and get you, or the, the family. And some people will say, well, like, what was it? The ones I can't remember. Is it Maryland or one of the New England towns? The one that was a family, and basically they all died of tuberculosis, and the fact that they were all stricken with tuberculosis led them to believe, and that when they opened the tomb of one of them, she was one of those deals. In other words, she didn't look like a corpse. And and it makes you think, okay, that's very easy to believe. But then this is the flip side. This is the part that when I think of that, I go, eh. Back then, tuberculosis consumption, as they called it, was very prevalent. Okay, a lot of people. It was easy to transmit. Especially if you're talking of family, people that were living together, in, let's say, under the same roof. It was not an uncommon thing. It was known that people and families could catch consumption, tuberculosis, and that it could decimate a family. In other words, I guess what I'm saying is the fact that one of them died from this disease, which was, remember, a pale, uh, coughing up blood, thin. These were all the symptoms that everybody in those years was very familiar with. This is consumption. All right. By then, consumption was well known to that you could catch it. All right. So I don't see why the fact that all these family members supposedly all died of consumption would make anybody believe that it was a vampire, because this was a very well-known disease of that time period. And sometimes people would linger for years. Some people would die sooner. From what I understand, until the, the more modern times, where they had the sanatoriums, and from what I understand, even like at the turn of the century, and even in the United States, when they had its outbreaks, basically you were mandated to go to the sanatorium. You couldn't hang out with the rest of the people because they knew it was contagious. They knew it was contagious, so they would send you off to these sanitariums, and of course, the mountain air or whatever air you were sent to was supposed to help you, and you had these different types of treatments until they discovered what was the bacteria that was causing it, and you could get whatever you could. But again, I still don't get why such a well-known, understood, and I don't want to say common enough disease would lead people to believe that family, that they were vampires, unless there was something more to the story than just a family members just dying one behind the other. I think that happened quite a lot, more than people cared to admit. All right. Like I said, sometimes people died quickly from consumption, others lingered for years. And as a matter of fact, I read at one point that it was romanticized to the point that being a victim of consumption was almost like a romantic thing. The lethargic, pale person that would get flushed, and I have to lay down because, of course, your energy's. And all this was almost like romanticized into being like, oh, a desirable thing, which is a horrible way to look at it. But yeah. So that's my, the thing on the vampire thing. Like, how much is superstition? How much is it made up? How much is it misunderstood disease? And how much is it, if possible, based in some type of truth? Maybe that truth doesn't exist now. And since we can't find it now, then it has to be false back then. What if some type of, well, let's go down the crazy road, well, rabbit hole. What? Maybe there was some type of vampirism. Maybe vampires died out, or that, whatever, something, or some being, or some human, or whatever you want to call it, that was drinking human blood. And there's people that will say, well, you know what? There's if this is this is the way your crazy works, which is you think you need to drink human blood because you think you're a vampire. And I would say I'm going to go on the supposition that that's a more modern construct. Back then, drinking blood or cannibalism was taboo, is not the word for it. Okay, but then you never know. Mental illness that somebody, but uh, maybe there was some type of being back then that really did exist, which doesn't exist anymore. That, contrary to what everybody believes, the vampires live forever and ever and are indestructible, and all these mighty powers that we give them. Maybe that isn't the case. We don't know. Or they transformed into what everybody thinks of now as energy vampires. They don't drink your blood, but they sap your energy. That's possible. Psychic vampires, up to a certain point. I have run across people like that, which it's all about them. And I'm not talking here about like no romantic relationship or anything. I'm talking about even friendship or people you meet where they absorb your, they either talk about, it's just them, all about them, and they dump all their problems on you, and if you ever run around them, they don't want to hear anything about you. Or if they do, they'll listen to a little bit of your thing at the beginning, like most normal conversations, and then it's like about them, and about their stuff and their woes and their this and their that and that and that and this. And when they leave, you're like, oh yeah, I think I need a nap. uh, I do believe there's people like that out there. They walk away all cheerful. They just had their own mini therapy session, and you footed the bill for it. Um, yeah, contrary, there's people that they don't need to actually have a therapy without going to a therapist. All they need is just a listening ear, somebody that's too kind, or too, their manners prohibit them from saying, "Shut up! I don't want to hear another thing about this, man," and walk away. Like, don't ever talk to me again. Yeah. So anyway, guys, like I said, I'm going to have a link to Pamela's website on the credits of the show if you want to check it out. Also, that book that just came out, like, I want to say a month ago, about Dogmen, Shapeshifter, Werewolves. Um, and again, don't forget, you can go to Miami Ghost Chronicles. You're going to find all the links to either the podcast or the video versions of the show. If you want to listen to a podcast without commercial interruptions, go to the links that I have on there, and you can either listen to it on the browser or download the MP3 files. If not, I've got links to all the well-known uh, podcast platforms. Okay, I'm also on a lot of different video channels just besides YouTube. I'm all over the place. If you've got a Sonos unit, you can find me on Alexa. You can find me on Sonos. If you want to listen to me while you're doing whatever you're doing at home, you can find me there. I'm all over the place. Just look for Marlene Pellicer, Stories of the Supernatural, Miami Ghost Chronicles. You're going to find me a bunch of different ways. And again, come back next week. I've got a lot of fantastic guests coming on, a lot of interesting people coming on to talk about different things, new people, repeat ones. So again, you are all wonderful, and come back. I look forward to spending this time with you. Till then.